Summer, this necklace is your mother's inheritance, the man said in a gentle, calm voice, squeezing the child's hands. He asked to wear it when he had problems that he could not solve, or when he felt some serious changes in his body. Clutching the necklace, the child picked it up and began to examine it and ask his father who his mother was. But as soon as he looked up, there was no one around. He began to anxiously look around in search of his father. But he was no longer around. Having gradually begun to open his eyes, the bright rays of the sun blinded our main character. He did not immediately come to his senses. But as soon as he realized everything, the boy immediately jumped up from the bed with a very frightened face. His whole body was bandaged. Looking at himself, he did not understand what had happened. At the moment, this was what interested him most of all. His thoughts were interrupted by the gentle voice of the nurse, who asked in surprise, "Are you really awake already?" Seeing this beautiful creature, our hero's nose started bleeding. He screamed throughout the ward, which scared the girl quite a bit. His whole face turned scarlet. He became embarrassed and also excited, which is why more and more blood began to flow from his nose with each passing second. As soon as the girl came to her senses, she angrily shouted at her patient, saying that he had scared her a lot with his unprovoked attack. After her evil parting words, our hero came to his senses, saying that he must have been confused, because before that, he had seen a vision. The nurse, in response, ran up to him and began to put him to bed, saying that it was a miracle that he was able to wake up at all, because he was badly wounded. But our main character did not understand this. He did not understand what had happened. Hearing this, the girl anxiously asked if the black-haired handsome man really didn't remember anything, but she didn't hear anything in response. Realizing that the guy was not joking, she exhaled, saying that he saved a little girl. At that moment he was almost hit by a car. As soon as our guy heard this, he happily said that he remembered it, asking if everything was okay with the child. At that moment the door began to open slowly, and behind it a gentle voice was heard. "My daughter is okay." Looking in the direction of the voice, the black-haired patient saw a beautiful girl holding a large bouquet of flowers in her hands. Gradually he began to shift his gaze, carefully examining the figure of the girl who had entered. She attracted him in appearance. Having looked at her carefully, his nose started bleeding again, and his whole face turned red. He tried to close his eyes, thinking that it was happening again. She, coming closer, seeing this incomprehensible reaction from the guy, asked what was wrong. Our hero answered with difficulty that nothing had happened, suggesting that this might be the result of an accident, since he constantly sees some strange visions. She responded with an anxious, almost angry voice, saying, "I know that you saved my daughter's life. I am grateful to you. I will give you enough money for compensation. You don't need to make excuses to blackmail me." Hearing this, our hero became wary, asking if she really meant to say that he was lying just to ask her for money. She didn't answer this, only asking if 1 million would be enough for him to forget about this situation. But she didn't hear any answer, sat down on a nearby chair and folded her hands, asking with a satisfied face if 1 million wasn't enough, adding that she would give 2. These words made our main character very angry. Throwing off the blanket, he shouted that he didn't save her daughter for this. He didn't need her money. At that moment the nurse shouted that the patient couldn't get up. The guy who was already leaving, sitting on a chair, beautiful, asked how the guy got $5 million. Our hero stopped. Without turning towards the girl, he replied that he needed nothing from her, because the life of her child could not be measured in money. Hearing these words, the young mother was very surprised, because she probably saw for the first time a person who refused such a large amount of money. After these words, our main character left the room, slamming the door behind him quite loudly. Already walking down the corridor, he was very angry, immersed in his thoughts. He did not pay any attention to those around him. He was angered by the very fact that such nasty parents could exist in this world, when suddenly he heard a child's voice. Looking down, he saw a little girl who asked if he was the big brother who saved her. Seeing that small, sweet face, our black-haired hero replied that it was so, to which the little child immediately thanked her savior. She smiled joyfully. Her face was sincere. At this time, a nurse came up behind him. She heard the guy say that he didn't regret at all that he saved her. Hearing this, she was surprised. And then she immediately began to smile, because the guy really became a real hero for her. Sometime later, the black-haired boy went home for that very necklace that his father talked about. Already at home, he sat with a slap all over his cheek, because when he entered the house, he was going to take a shower, but in front of him there were 2 girls who were yelling at him at that very moment. One of them, wrapped in a towel, screamed that he was a real pervert, and the second consoled her, asking her friend not to be afraid, because he was her cousin. With her arms folded, she asked the guy where he had been for the past 2 days. because she had tried to call him, but the guy's phone was not working. Hearing this, he couldn't believe what 2 days, because just recently, but before finishing speaking, he anxiously asked what the date was today. And the girl in pink jeans added that after 2 days of absence, she found him peeping at her friend. To which the guy replied that it was not his fault, and she was covered with a towel, so he didn't see anything anyway. Hearing this, the yellow-haired girl tensed up, because it was true. But the moment he entered the shower, he said something about a teddy bear. It was at that very moment when he came to her that she did not understand how this was even possible. This greatly confused the girl again. She did not understand how to react to this. So she turned to her friend and said that her cousin was very strange. Sometime later, our hero was already on the street. He went to the sports ground to test his physical skills. Jumping up and grabbing the horizontal bar, he began to pull himself up at incredible speed, demonstrating not quite human strength and speed. A vacationing girl was watching all this from the side, and she immediately turned her attention to the black-haired boy. And our hero himself at this time thought that after he put on this pendant, his body became lighter, and his strength and speed increased significantly. Unable to bear it, the same grandfather who had been watching approached our hero and asked if the guy had served before, arguing his question by saying that he was in very good shape. The boy, surprised at these assumptions, did not answer at once. But as soon as he came to his senses, he replied that no, because he was only 19. Immediately after this answer, a rather unfriendly atmosphere hung in the air. The old man asked in a rougher voice whether the guy would like to spar with him. Jumping down and waving his arms, the black-haired boy replied that he didn't think it was a good idea to fight someone your age. Grandpa responded by jumping onto one of the nearby chairs, asking if the boy was afraid of hurting him. And at that very second, with a light movement, he threw that very chair at him, which began to approach with incredible force and speed. He flew past. The main character could not raise his mouth, because there was no limit to his surprise. With a slight mockery, the grandfather asked what the guy thought now. Seeing these movements, the black-haired man guessed that the person in front of him was a martial artist, so he couldn't miss this opportunity, so he immediately agreed to this guess. Seeing these manners, the grandfather smiled, saying that it is rare to meet such good and not arrogant guys these days. But a second later, both heroes were standing in a fighting stance, preparing to attack each other. Our main character was the first to attack, who tried to grab the old man by the shoulder, thereby throwing the old man to the ground. But he immediately caught his attack, because he immediately understood what the young guy was going to do. Somehow the young man was able to brace himself and not let himself be knocked off his feet. Therefore, both heroes found themselves at a disadvantage. They immediately retreated, increasing the distance. As he retreated, our hero thought he was close, but fortunately his body felt lighter than before. These actions on the part of the black-haired man pleased the old man. He praised him for these magnificent movements, and also added that it was his turn to attack. Seeing this stand, it seemed that our hero felt something incomprehensible, but he did not understand what it was, because right at that second, he saw what he shouldn't have seen. He could clearly see the trajectory of his attacks. As he swung his sword about to strike, he thought that he might be able to defeat this old man. These actions on the part of the guy made the old man wary. It seemed that he immediately began to take his opponent seriously. After all, he had to defend himself. With also incredible speed, the young guy approached him and struck, but it was blocked. Grandpa didn't understand how the guy was able to see the weak points of his technique. These thoughts made him even more wary. After this attack, the fight ended immediately. Grandpa left almost immediately. Sometime later, at school, our hero was pestered by some red-haired girl who screamed and asked how he dared to talk to her like that when she stood up for him. The girl was screaming at the whole room. Chilly. She was very angry, because just recently she saved a boy from bullying by other classmates, and he did not thank her. She asked if the boy really thought that she would not dare to beat him. But her angry scream was interrupted by the teacher's words, who said that everyone should sit down in their seats, because the lesson was starting, and there would be a trial exam today. As she left, she still angrily told the guy that she was not finished with him yet, and then she headed towards the door. These actions angered the teacher. He shouted, asking where they were going, because the lesson had begun. Hearing this, the red-haired girl turned to the two who were following them, saying that they would go and write a sample together with her. They immediately began to carry out the order. These actions made the teacher even more angry, but she no longer listened to her teacher, walking further and further away. Seeing these actions from Chili, our main character exhaled heavily, while the teacher started walking around the room and handing out samples of the exam. When it was our main character's turn, he immediately took the sheet and began reading the questions. He was very surprised, because as soon as he saw the question, The answers themselves came to his mind. He didn't even have to count anything. Only a few minutes passed, and our hero was already on his way to hand in his work. Approaching the teacher, he said that he was going to hand it in. The teacher was very surprised, and began to anxiously ask what was wrong with Xiang Tian, adding that he shouldn't have written whatever came to hand, because he was a diligent student. With a smile on his face, Xiang Tian told him that he had answered all the questions seriously, which the teacher could verify for himself. Chili was waiting for the pair on the street, lost in her own thoughts. Almost immediately after our hero, a pair of girls ran out, shouting to their sister Chili that they were finished. She angrily asked them what was the matter, since Xiang Tian had come out faster than them, to which they assumed that the guy had put the answers at random and handed in his work. Our hero himself approached those same guys who, a couple of minutes ago, right before the lesson, had picked on him and tried to humiliate him. The duo asked Chili if he needed help, to which the red-haired one replied that they would wait until Tian got beat up a bit. The leader of their company, with a nasty face, turned to our boy, saying that he was ashamed of him, because he didn't even touch Wenjian, although she was such a cutie. Our hero, breathing heavily, replied that they hadn't been in a relationship for that long, so he could do whatever he wanted with her. He didn't need to report everything. And the nasty guy continued, saying that he didn't deserve to fight him for the girl, because he had already lost. But he also added that he really hated it when someone else touched his toys, so he would help him completely forget her. Waving his hand, he gave a signal to his subordinates. At that very second, our main character's eyes began to shine, and it seemed that he began to feel again that feeling he had in the fight with the old man. With incredible speed, he assumed a fighting stance, beginning to use some strange but definitely effective attack. It was that same old man's technique that he somehow managed to copy and use right now. With one light but powerful blow, he sent flying one of the big guys who were about to beat him. He didn't even understand what happened. Drool started flying out of his mouth. That same schoolboy who stood there with a disgusting, satisfied face almost lost his jaw from surprise. Like Chili herself, she was very surprised by this, because before this, the guy had never shown his strength. Almost immediately they were separated, and a surprised Chili pounced on our hero. The old man was informed about our main character, where he studied, and also that he saved the child. But one thing did not add up, because all the information about his parents was classified. His father had an A level, and his mother an S. Hearing this, the grandfather said that recently there had been unrest in Zhanghai. It was time for him to leave the city, and he told his people to tell them to protect the boy. It was necessary to kill everyone who tried to harm him. The old man was angry that someone was trying to cause trouble on his territory, and in an even more rude tone, he ordered that his order be carried out in any way. Zhanghai City, in the Quicksand Assassination Organization building, the situation seemed to be unsettled. The boy came to his lord, the Bat, and asked when they would strike, and he replied that it was too early, they just needed to continue to follow him. They would attack when they learned the location of the secret scroll. In a rough voice, Lord Bat repeated that they should keep an eye on the guy, and if anyone attacked him, they should definitely kill him. The boy who came to his lord bowed and said that they would carry out the order of their lord, and then bowed out. Our hero walked slowly along the shopping street of Zhanghai City, and Chili ran behind him, who screamed and asked the black-haired guy when he would teach her the martial arts with which he was able to scatter those scoundrels. And Tian replied that he had already said that he was not a master, but only knew a couple of tricks that he would better pass on to his wife and children in the future. Joyfully, the red-haired woman said that in that case he should accept her. But the guy answered with indifference, saying that he was not going to adopt her. She, standing right in front of him and placing her hands on her hips, said that he had thought of the wrong thing, because she meant for him to marry her. Hearing these words, our hero almost fainted. His whole body convulsed. But as soon as he came to his senses, he said that he did not want to marry a girl who had no face or breasts, and then turned around and started to leave. She didn't remain sad for long. Literally a couple of seconds later, she again began to run after the guy, calling him master. She asked him to enjoy what he had. Suddenly she saw a very bright sign that caught her attention. She immediately grabbed Tian, telling him to look over there, because there was a sale of instant lottery tickets. They definitely had to try it. These words angered the guy. He asked why the girl needed this. Because her family is already very rich. She began to move away towards the exhibition and said that money had nothing to do with it, that it was just a test of luck. Running up to the shop, she started waving and calling for the boss. She was going to test her luck. She asked to give them a couple of instant tickets. One of the men who was standing next to the bench immediately looked at the guys who approached. He mockingly said that they would simply lose money, since little children cannot think anything about the lottery. Hearing these words from the man, Chili became angry, asking how dare he talk to his aunt like that. At that very second, our hero appeared right in front of her, covering her with his back. He asked if she had any prizes here, and then, without waiting for an answer, said that he would play. A few seconds later, there was a huge number of tickets lying on the table. The man thrust his hand into the mountain of tickets. He pulled out the one with the number 50, started waving this ticket, with a satisfied face. He said that it is done like this. Our hero began to use his strange ability, with which he could see through objects. And thanks to her, he pulled out a ticket with an $800 mark, which surprised the girl and the man very much. Turning to the seller, our hero told him to give him a prize of $700, and for the rest more tickets. Chili tried to stop him, because luck is falling every time, but nothing came of it. The same man who had just lost the mini-fight said with a smile on his face that he loved it when people like the guy spent all their winnings in the hope of getting even more. These words only made our main character laugh. He thought that he didn't care about the words of this boor, because he wasn't going to lose. Within seconds, each of our hero's tickets was worth more than $800. Seeing this, the trio standing nearby did not understand how he could be so lucky. As soon as they came to their senses, they shouted in one voice that this was simply impossible, and began asking the guy how he managed to do this. Already walking down the street, Chili could not contain her delight. She shouted loudly that the master was incredible, because he won more than $5,000. She asked him to teach her this. And our main character indifferently asked the girl if she had wanted to learn martial arts before. Because now she was asking to teach her how to find lottery tickets, the girl immediately answered that she wanted to learn this and that. At this time, our hero himself was about to call someone on his phone. As soon as the phone was picked up, he immediately greeted his cousin, saying that his phone broke a couple of days ago, so he bought himself a new one. He asked again where he should go this evening. As soon as his cousin told him the address, he immediately started stopping a taxi to get to that place. The red-haired girl herself, looking at the master at that moment, asked where he was going. The black-haired boy asked her not to follow him, because he had very important things to do, where she was of no use. Having said this, he got into the car. Red-haired Chili only managed to shout sadly after the car. Our hero arrived at the antique street. Today it was too crowded. As he walked along it, he was lost in his thoughts, because he couldn't believe that she asked him to portray her boyfriend at her birthday party. But it was his mistake that he completely forgot about her birthday, so he couldn't refuse. He'd better prepare a good gift for her, our hero continued to think, looking at the counters. His attention was drawn to a rather rude cry asking for the master to make way. Listening to the crowd, he realized that there was an expert in antique appraisal, Master Shu. Stopping at one stall, Master Shu said that he hoped that this young man's business would prosper well, and everyone around began to greet him joyfully. Our hero himself didn't pay much attention to it, but began to look at the goods and think that there were some worthwhile things here. He thanked his super eyesight for this. After all, it is thanks to these eyes that he can distinguish a fake from an original. Having begun to examine the nearby counters in even greater detail, his gaze fixed straight ahead. After all, he noticed the truth, something worthwhile. He could not tear his attention away from this product. At that very second, he rushed towards him, almost knocking down Master Shu, who managed to step aside at the last moment. The guards tried to stop him, but the old man raised his hand, thus telling them not to touch him. But our hero didn't pay much attention to them, already asking the seller the price. The seller, with an incomprehensible face, replied that he saw sincerity in his heart, so he was ready to give it to him for only $8,000. Naturally, our hero replied that it was too expensive, because he was an ordinary student and could not have that kind of money. The old man who was watching this situation smiled, thinking that this rude guy had a great look. He was going to help him once. Just like the seller himself, he noticed that the old man was looking in his direction. He really hoped that the old man would not expose him. Our hero, bending down at that moment to the fat salesman, quietly whispered to him, "How about 2,000? I know it's a fake." The shop owner began to laugh awkwardly and sweat profusely, and replied that he could not sell it for less than 5,000. After thinking for a bit, our hero pointed to the stones lying nearby, saying, "Let's do this. You add a couple more of these useless stones and shake hands." Hearing this, the seller was pleased and agreed, immediately starting to pack these stones into a bag. After waiting for the end of this situation, Old Man Shu approached our hero, saying that he was a good merchant, because he knew how to choose his words correctly. However, he also added that he was sorry because he fell for such a stupid trick. Arguing that this piece of jade was worth only $200, he felt sorry for the guy's lack of experience, since he had paid $5,000 for it. Taking out an emerald-colored stone, our hero began waving it from side to side, asking if he really thought so. Not waiting for any reaction from the old man, our hero deliberately dropped him from his hands, and he began to fall. Seeing this situation, Old Man Shu was very surprised, because he did not understand what this was all about. As soon as the emerald coin fell to the ground, it broke into several pieces, making a loud ringing sound. As he began to look down, the old man's mouth dropped open in surprise, because he could not believe his own thoughts. He immediately asked loudly if the black-haired guy really knew that it was an ordinary fake. At that very moment, a smile appeared on the boy's face, and he asked him if Master Shu really wanted to say that he also had a keen eye. And at that moment he opened the bag and took out one of the stones, thinking that he had done all this and paid only because of it. After all, this is an ancient relic, condensed after the death of an outstanding monk. He had only heard of such things in legends. He never thought that he would get one, the old man thought, seeing this stone. All of his family's property was currently in the hands of his nephew Shu Qing. He had been trying to recruit talented people for many years. He hoped to one day get back everything that was his. He also thought that this was probably the same guy, one of those rare talents he had been looking for all this time. The old man continued to think, looking towards the guy who was leaving. Suddenly, he called out loudly to him, asking him to stop. Our hero immediately turned towards the master. The old man asked if he wanted to arrange a small competition. Hearing this, our hero understood what the old man meant and asked again what he meant. He was interested in what they would compete for, why, and in what. The crowd around rudely judged our protagonist, saying that he was ignorant, because he didn't even know about Master Shu's skills. Each of them knew perfectly well that they would be competing in the evaluation of antiques. The old man himself said, as they said, "I am a famous appraiser on the antique street," and then asked, "So, will you accept my offer?" Our hero agreed, saying, in case of victory, the old man should buy what he chooses. Hearing this, Master Shu laughed loudly, saying that this was a bold proposal, because in case of loss, the boy offered his life. But a second later, his mood changed completely, and in a rougher voice he asked if he was ready to serve him in case of his defeat. Hearing this, our main character began to smile, saying that everything suited him. The crowd rejoiced because the guy agreed to compete with Master Shu in appraising antiques. Sometime later, a table in the middle of the street, the floor is full of some things. The old man stood next to the table and asked which of these things were genuine, and also added that if the guy named 3 correct ones, he would win. Our protagonist immediately took a close look at them using his unique eyes. He accepted the offer, saying, "I will accept defeat if I make a mistake even once." The old man was a little taken aback by this answer, but having come to his senses, he praised the guy for his audacity, agreeing to his conditions. The others standing and watching this competition could not believe the courage of the black-haired guy, not hesitating to loudly say that he was crazy and out of his mind. Taking the box, he examined it carefully, tilting it from side to side, and finally answered that it was real. The old man immediately replied that this was the correct answer, because this was the toilet box used by Empress Dowager Cixi of the Qin dynasty. Our hero decided to complicate things a little by asking if he could break the fakes, as proof of his words. After thinking a little, the old man agreed, adding that he could afford to pay for them all. At that very second, he took the glass fake and threw it to the side, thanking the old man for it. It fell to the ground and broke loudly, and there was total silence, because no one knew whether it was a fake or an original. But a second later, loud discussions began, because the guy had ruined it. Some of the crowd said that this vase looked real. Bending down and picking up one of the pieces of the porcelain vase, our protagonist began to lift it slowly, and then turning it over to the other side, he showed it to everyone, because there was a seal on it. It was the company seal, and everyone in the crowd immediately began to shout in surprise, because everyone understood that it was created on a conveyor belt. Old Man Shu, seeing this action from the black-haired guy, asked how he knew that there was a seal inside the vase, and he immediately replied with a smile on his face that he simply had a brilliant eye. Taking a glass pancake of approximately the same color, he loudly shouted that this was also a fake, and then he broke it. It shattered into several pieces. Our hero laughed. He wasn't going to stop there, picking up the next thing on the table and shouting that it was also a fake. As he was about to continue, our hero stopped abruptly, because Old Man Shu congratulated the young man on his victory, and said that he could choose whatever he wanted. After carefully examining the table, he picked up the bracelet, saying that he would take it, because it was an excellent thing. Seeing the bracelet, the old man was surprised, thinking that this bracelet was just an insignificant thing that he put there to confuse him. He did not understand why the guy chose it. Our hero saw the grandpa's reaction perfectly well. He was going to show him what the bracelet was, so he bit his finger until it bled, and then I dropped it directly on him, and he immediately began to emit a bright purple color. Everyone in the crowd realized that it was not just a bracelet, it was made of bloody jade. At that very second, the crowd began shouting out amounts. It all started with 1 million, and sometime later, The bidding reached 2. But the black-haired boy apologized, saying that he was not going to sell it. Grandpa couldn't answer this. He could only look in the direction of the departing talent. As he was about to leave this street, he began to hear something. But he did not understand what exactly. It seemed to him that they were talking to him. Sometime later, right next to him, someone turned to him and asked him to stop. It was that same Master Shu who said, "I don't know what you think of me, but how about we become friends?" Hearing this, our hero responded with a smile on his face, because having Master Shu as a friend is a blessing for 3 lifetimes ahead. Our hero understood that he needed connections, and also needed to make a name for himself. He immediately introduced himself to the old man. At that moment, a car stopped near them. A man in black, who, as our hero assumed, was guarded by security, slowly began to emerge from it. This guy in black asked if the guy's name was really Zhang Tian. He had a tattoo on his face. Some time ago, in a hospital in Shanghai City, there were some loud screams coming from near the toilet. One of the guys in the hospital had a blue face and was making some strange sounds. Sitting on the toilet, he screamed loudly. His whole body was shaking. It was covered in sweat. There was a huge crowd of people standing near the toilet. One of the men in black turned to the doctor. I asked about the results of the examination, to which the doctor replied that there were none, since it is impossible to examine a patient who cannot spend even half a minute without going to the toilet. They have already tested the stool to rule out possible drug-related factors. A subordinate leaned over to the man with a mustache and said that they had just heard from the young master that he had a conflict with a disciple named Xiang Tian, who told him to get checked for diarrhea when he returned home. The man ordered that someone be sent for him immediately, to which the same subordinate replied that they had already poisoned Asen and 2 of his henchmen, so that they would bring the guy. And so, Asana found the very student who had spoken about diarrhea. Their gazes met. The man with the earring in his nose and the tattoo under his eye ordered our guy to follow him. At that very moment, Xiang Tian's face changed. He asked the man who he was anyway. Behind our hero, Old Man Shu asked the guy to be careful, saying that this was Shu Xiaohua's personal bodyguard. This guy was very strong. The man in black, seeing the old man, said that he could let him go since he was their master's uncle, but only if he did not interfere. Hearing the surname Shu, our hero immediately guessed that they were related to each other. The old man said in a rough voice that this younger brother was his friend, so he would not dare to touch him while he was here. Immediately, Master Shu's guards surrounded our main character, intending to protect him to the last, because by saying this, the old man made it clear to them that they should stand up for the guy's defense. A smile appeared on Asan's face. Seeing this situation, he seemed to be happy. He carefully examined each of the men. And then, just a moment later, as if nothing had happened, he scattered 4 defenders of our main one. They couldn't even answer him, but only screamed in pain. The old man asked Asan in fear if he really thought he could do whatever he wanted just because Shu Xiaohua was behind him. The big guy with the earrings didn't react to this at all, but turned to his guys and ordered them to grab the young guy. They immediately ran to carry out their master's order, standing right in front of our main character, who in turn only sighed in displeasure. And then he abruptly put his hands on their shoulders, starting to squeeze his hands. They even bent for a second under this powerful pressure. But just a moment later, they found themselves on the ground, because Xiang Tian threw them in different directions. The men in suits were unable to stand on their feet. Seeing this power, Asan's movements could not believe his eyes. He was much more surprised than the rest of the people surrounding our main character. The old man himself was very surprised, because his new comrade was strong not only with his eyes, but also physically. Our hero thought that this big guy standing in front of him really looked strong. He should have scared him a little, so he asked if he really still wanted to grab him. He, in turn, slowly approaching the young guy, replied that he fights well and has enough strength, but by his standards, he is still too young. In a calmer voice, he asked our hero what connected him with Fan Chufeng. Upon hearing this, our hero thought that if he had at least something connected with him, he would have learned more techniques. But out loud he said something else. He asked what this useless talk was for. He told the big guy with the earrings to attack if he wanted it so much. These words made the tattooed guard laugh very hard. With a mentally abnormal smile, he said, "If that's the case, then don't blame me for cruelty, kid." At that very second, our hero took a fighting stance, preparing to take a blow. Our hero was not sure of his victory, because in this situation, he had nothing else left. Literally immediately, a voice was heard behind Asan. People in black with masks on their faces approached him. One of them said, "Isn't this the famous bodyguard Asan? I've heard a lot about you." He immediately turned towards the voice and almost lost consciousness from fear. His face immediately became covered in sweat, and in a trembling voice he asked if it really was quicksand. Shaking his head slightly from side to side, the leader of this group said rudely, "Since you know who we are, then get the hell out of here. We have important business with this kid." Ambar was no longer so menacing. Still with a trembling voice, he explained to the people in the mask that he was simply ordered to bring the guy, so he had to take him. He also added that he did not want to conflict with them. However, they immediately told him in response that this would not work, because they needed him. After these words, even more sweat began to flow down his face. He understood perfectly well that this was a well-known group of killers, and even if he could defeat them now, it would come back to haunt him in the future. So he sighed heavily and replied that he would retreat for today. As he was leaving, he stepped on one of his subordinates, pressing on his stomach and shouting for him to get up quickly, because they were leaving. Watching this, our hero wondered what was going on here. He didn't understand who they were, because even Asan didn't dare to go against these guys. He also wondered why they decided to save him, while at that time the masked people were approaching our hero. Naturally, the young lad, seeing them, was quite frightened, asking who they were, since he had never heard of them before. The same leader of the group answered him that they just needed something from him. He ordered to give him the relic that his father left behind. The boy, hearing this, either surprised or horrified, asked again if it was really his father's relic. The man explained to the mask that it was a scroll that belonged to his father. He also added that they were giving our hero a week to find it and bring it to them. Otherwise, everything would be bad. In response, our hero, in a not very friendly tone, replied that he did not remember his father leaving him any scroll. He asked where he could get it from. They, leaving, replied that it did not particularly bother them. They asked to find him, or he would die a terrible death. Xiang Tian shouted after them that he didn't know where to look for them. He asked them to tell him in more detail what they wanted, but they no longer listened to him, not paying attention to the boy. An old man came up from behind, put his hand on the boy's shoulder, and asked what was going on. He was interested in what these masked men wanted from him. Turning around with a smile on his face, the boy answered the old man that they had confused him with someone else. While he himself thought that he only had a week, he had to return to his old house and search everything there tomorrow. But first, today he was going to finish all the things that had accumulated today, so he went to the birthday party. Inside, a girl with a great figure in a beautiful dress was congratulated on her birthday by everyone around her, and she tried to respond to everyone with gratitude. One of the men stood out the most, approaching with a huge bouquet. He turned to Miss Qingshui saying, "Please allow me to present you with my gift." Everyone around was talking about how no one could compare to this guy, and they also noticed that this fair-haired young man was a devoted admirer of Miss Qingshu. Seeing this face, the girl began to smile awkwardly, and at the same time thought that this bastard had already shown up. But Xiang Tian was still not there. But he was suddenly overtaken by a red-haired girl, who stood right in front of him and began to apologize for her lateness to the gray-haired girl. She looked at her friend with a smile, while the fair-haired young man nervously and angrily bit his lips, starting to spin a large box right in front of the birthday girl's face. With a beaming face, she asked to see what she had prepared for her. She, taking the box, immediately began to open it, interest getting the better of the silver-haired girl. As soon as she saw the contents inside, her face immediately turned red, and she asked in surprise if this was really hers. Those standing behind, as soon as they saw the red-haired girl's gift, began to discuss it heatedly, because it was a rare antique. They also understood that today, no one would be able to surpass this gift. The young lad himself was thinking at that moment that he had not expected to give in to a woman today. But he did not see anything terrible here. Because women were not his competitors, he simply needed to surpass all men. The very second he thought about it, he knelt down. A ring was visible in a bouquet of blue roses. With a gentle voice he said, "On this special day, please accept my love for you and this modest gift." At that very moment, the birthday girl was taken aback. She didn't know what to answer, because she had the most negative attitude towards this guy. Behind her, the other girls started pushing her, telling her to take the offer. Every girl in the room was thinking, if I were in her place, I would agree in that second. The fair-haired man himself, with a nasty smile, thought that this was the perfect atmosphere, because she would not be able to refuse under such pressure. As soon as she accepted his flowers, he won. Suddenly, the entire hall heard an apology for being late. It was our main character who turned to Miss Qingshui. She, seeing a familiar silhouette, sewed again. She joyfully shouted that the boy had finally come, because she already thought that she had forgotten. Running towards him, she immediately hugged his hand, shouting loudly, "I want to introduce to you all, this is my boyfriend, Xiang Tian." The boy who had recently been kneeling could not believe his eyes, thinking that this was a homeless person. His clothes were all wrinkled and his shoes were dirty, which meant that he didn't even have a car. So, after collecting his thoughts, he approached Miss Ching Shui again, saying, "It seems that your boyfriend is here empty-handed," asking in a disgusting, as if mocking, whether he didn't even buy you a gift. At that very moment, Miss Ching Shui replied that she was happy to just be with him. She didn't need any gifts from him. But our main character was not so simple either. He immediately turned to the so-called girl, asking in a gentle voice if she really thought that he would come to her birthday party without a present. Taking out the very bracelet that he had taken possession of in the duel with Master Shu, he said that he had prepared it especially for her. She, having taken it and examined its scarlet bright glow, could not believe her eyes, and she asked loudly enough if this really was bloody jade, as soon as her guesses were confirmed. She added that it was a priceless treasure. She couldn't understand where the guy managed to get it, and our hero, turning away, looking with a satisfied face towards the guy in the suit, replied that it was cheap stuff that could be bought in any store. She immediately leaned towards his ear, whispering, "Xiangtian, you weren't doing anything illegal." She didn't understand where he got so much money to buy this, to which our hero asked his cousin not to ruin the moment. Suddenly, he sharply raised his hand, pointing to the side and adding that this was not his entire gift. He asked the girl to follow him. They immediately walked towards the huge door in silence. Miss Ching Shui couldn't even imagine what was behind that door. Seeing that the girl nearby was hesitating, our main character, with a smile on his face and a gentle voice, asked him to open it himself and take a look. She, opening it, could not understand what could be behind it, because she knew perfectly well that behind it there would simply be a hall. But as soon as she opened it and took a step forward, she was immediately covered in flower petals that began to swirl around her. The entire hall was illuminated with flower petals. They swirled around the entire room, creating a wonderful atmosphere. Immediately, a huge crowd of people in beautiful suits appeared, who began clapping and loudly congratulating our main character's cousin. She couldn't contain her surprise, and behind her the boy said that since there wasn't enough space in the room at home, he allowed them to settle here. And he also added that she should look at the street and see a beautiful inscription that was written on a huge skyscraper. Embarrassed, with a trembling but at the same time pleased voice, she came close to her so-called boyfriend, saying that this was truly wonderful. And she herself thought that if he were really her boyfriend, it would be wonderful. But she immediately threw her thoughts aside, because the boy was her cousin. Our hero standing behind thought that this was all due to Master Shu. He didn't expect that Grandpa would want to do so much. He was glad to have such a comrade. Sometime later, going outside, our heroes saw a white BMW slowly approaching, which had come to pick them up. They immediately sat down in it. Our hero sat in front, and the two girls in the back. Sev, our hero's cousin, saw Mr. Shu. Realizing that it was all thanks to his help, she immediately began to thank him for the bloody jade, to which the old man frowned and said, "It seems you misunderstood, miss. The bloody jade is entirely Xiangtian's merit. He found it among a pile of antiques with his abilities." She immediately looked at him, thinking, it turns out it was true. She didn't understand when Xiangtian managed to become an expert in appraising antiques. But our hero interrupted her thoughts, smiling as he said that he was simply very lucky to find it in this pile. Sometime later, a van, which was clearly breaking the speed limit several times, rushed past the car with our heroes at high speed. Xiangtian noticed him at that moment. Turning towards him, he used his unique eyes to look inside him, and then he noticed familiar silhouettes. Inside sat a girl with a little girl in her arms, who was crying. He immediately turned to Old Man Shu, telling him to follow the van that had just passed them. Hearing this, the old man did not understand what was happening, but he knew only one thing. If the kid said that, it meant it was not the time to doubt his words. That's why he immediately pressed the brake and sharply turned the steering wheel in the direction of the turn. The car turned around at great speed, going into a drift, and white smoke rose from the tires. Our protagonist's cousin didn't understand what was going on, so she asked the guy what he wanted from the van driver. Our hero ignored the girl, turning to his brother Shu. He told him that when they caught up with the van, he should take the girls sitting in the back to a safe place and anonymously call the police. He also told them that Zhen Ru and her daughter had been kidnapped. After these words, there was a slight silence in the car, but as soon as everyone understood, they all shouted in surprise in one voice. After some time of pursuit, our heroes noticed how the van stopped near an old building, and several people got out of the car. They then took the girl and her daughter out of the van and headed inside the building. The little girl was very scared. As soon as they entered, one of the men immediately pushed the girl hard in the back. She was unable to stay on her feet while covering her child and fell to the ground. Rising up, still covering her daughter, she spoke loudly towards the men that she knew who had sent them. because these were people who wanted to take away part of her company shares. The bald man with the scar on his bald head smiled and said, "Since you know this, then just shut up. We'll just record a short video with you and leave." Another man, approaching the girl, immediately took the baby by the hand and began to pull it to the side. The little girl began to cry for her mother. On a maternal reflex, she tried to rush towards her daughter with a scream, but she was grabbed by the blouse, not allowing her to do so. She began to sob, loudly and hysterically asking for help. She begged to save them. At that very moment our hero appeared, who addressed the men with a cold-blooded voice, saying that the police would soon be here, so they had better stop all this. The man, seeing him, became very angry, and with the same furious voice he asked who the hell the guy was. All three of them immediately rushed towards him, shouting insults, and they shouted that they would kill him right now. However, our main character was much stronger than them. In a matter of seconds he dealt a powerful blow to three of them at once, and they fell to the ground unconscious. The bald man with the scar said nastily, as if he had stopped them halfway, and also insulted Xiang Tian several more times. Taking out his gun, he aimed it towards the girl, saying that since the mission had failed, it was time to end it all. And then he pulled the trigger. He was going to kill Zhenru, because in this case, her shares would become cheaper anyway. The girl understood that right now she would die. Right before her eyes, her whole life began to flash. She was very scared, because at that moment her daughter ran up to her. She began to cover her with her body. But she came to her senses almost immediately, because our main character covered them with his body. The bullet hit him straight, and blood began to flow from his body. Seeing this situation, she could not believe her eyes, because before this, no one had even come close to doing something like this for her. She did not understand why he was protecting them. It was painful for her to look at the dying savior. She screamed loudly as she began to see blood gradually dripping onto the ground. The bald man himself stood with a satisfied face, saying that the guy deserved it, because no one asked him to be a hero. At that very moment, our hero fell to the ground without any signs of life, and the man began to approach the girl, saying that they would immediately return to where they had left off so as not to waste time. As soon as he approached Miss Zhenru, our hero began to rise right behind him, as if he had been resurrected anew, but he didn't notice it. And our hero took advantage of this successfully, pushing the man in the back with all his might. Because he didn't notice the guy, he couldn't stay on his feet and fell loudly to the ground, causing a loud crash to be heard throughout the building. The girl, shedding tears, looked towards the young boy, saying his name in a trembling voice. At that moment the guy himself didn't really hear her, because the pain was too intense, and blood began to cough out of his mouth. He immediately rushed to the side, starting to walk toward the door. The girl rushed after him, but Xiang Tian told her to get out of here as quickly as possible. Having caught up with him, she saw that the guy was writhing in pain. She said that she needed to call an ambulance immediately, because he had a bullet wound. Sweating from the heat, writhing in pain, our main character said that he could not go to the hospital. He offered to go to his home, because he was close. The girl, seeing the guy's seriousness, agreed to his conditions, took him by the arm, and helped him get home. There she immediately began to look for a first aid kit in order to treat the wound, while the guy himself was undressing at that moment in order to free the wound. Having found it, she took out everything necessary to take care of the wound, and after some time, everything was done. Already finishing, tying the bandage, she asked the guy why he didn't want to go to the hospital, because he had severe bleeding and it was difficult to stop it at home. Trying not to show his pain too much, Xiang Tian thought that his body had changed somehow, and if he went to the hospital, he would most likely become a guinea pig once they saw these changes. Closing his eyes, our hero began to think about what to do next, when suddenly his pocket began to emit a bright light. The girl immediately put her hand in the boy's pocket, and began to take out this object. She did not understand what it was. Taking it out, wondering what this glow was, she began to examine it from different angles. Suddenly her hand began to burn, because of which she could not hold him. He fell out of her hands. Having fallen right on the wound where the man had shot, she began to grow dimmer with each passing second. It seemed to be absorbed into the young man's body, and a few seconds later, the glowing object completely disappeared from sight. Seeing that the blood had disappeared from the bandage, she unbandaged the body of the already sleeping boy. Her surprise knew no bounds. She did not understand how this was possible, because his wound had completely disappeared. At that very moment her daughter came out, woke up, rubbing her eyes. She asked her mother in an anxious voice how her older brother was. She, approaching the little one, replied that everything was fine with him. She asked her daughter to let the boy rest a little, because he had had a hard day. Some time later, our hero began to open his eyes, because he felt some kind of warmth, energy that enveloped his entire body. Right at his feet, some kind of silhouette appeared. which came straight from him. It seemed that he felt something familiar, but did not understand what. But after some time, this energy and silhouette completely disappeared. Looking around, he wondered what it was. Two girls fell asleep right next to him. Bending down and looking at the wound, he saw some kind of stone that had been absorbed into his body, and the wound had completely disappeared. Taking hold of it, he took it out, starting to examine it from different sides. He did not understand, wondering if this was all because of him. Going into the next room, our hero thought that a lot had happened recently that had completely changed his ordinary life. He took the shirt and began to put it on, while at that time he was completely immersed in his thoughts. After all, first a mysterious pendant, then a martial arts master, then a master in antique appraisal. Even an organization of killers is pursuing him, our protagonist continued to think, when suddenly these thoughts were interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Opening it, he noticed those same people in the mask, who immediately began to say that the guy had not even started looking for that very package. The man gave the young boy a final warning in a menacing voice, saying that if he did not find the scroll that very day, he would die. He, spreading his hands as if mocking them, replied that he did not know about any scroll. He asked how in that case he could find it. Hearing this answer, the same masked man said in a rough voice, "It looks like you've decided to go against the quicksand." Our hero himself began to use his unique eyes, asking himself what he should do. Even though he had eyes that could see their movements, he still did not know what they were capable of. He began to think that right now, today, he could die. These thoughts did not leave his head. The second masked man standing behind him began to slowly raise his hand, clearly preparing to attack. In an instant, they rushed from one place, both rushing towards our main character, intending to kill him. But Xiang, with the help of his unique eyes, was able to dodge this attack. As with the subsequent ones, both men moved incredibly quickly, harmoniously, but it did not bring any benefit. This angered the quicksand attackers. One of them swung his arm, intending to deliver a powerful blow. Our hero at this time mentally asked himself to concentrate as best as possible in order to strike back. At some point, he managed to grab the attacker by the arm, thereby starting to pull him towards him. The masked man didn't expect this from the young guy, so he stopped for a few seconds, lost in his own thoughts. Our main character took advantage of this by starting to pull the guy even harder towards himself, thereby trying to knock him back. At one point, all the young man's strength gathered in his hand, and he was able to throw the attacker into a concrete wall. But he managed to group himself, landing on the ground. He could not believe that this was just Fang Shufen's combat technique. The attacker was thinking how the guy could be related to Shufen. After this throw, he realized one thing. That was that he couldn't underestimate the guy. After all, if you let him hide in the villa in the Green Forest, it will become too problematic to get to him. As soon as the kettle fell to the ground, everyone suddenly stopped, because right behind our main character appeared the girl whom he had saved a little while earlier. Holding the kettle in her hands, trembling, she screamed at them to get out of here as quickly as possible. Naturally, our hero was very scared for her. Still scared, he shouted for her to quickly return to the house, and she immediately shouted a refusal in response, arguing that he had saved her life and the life of her daughter, and she could not allow him to die. Exhaling heavily but smiling, our hero said that at first he really did hate her. He also added that he didn't expect her to show such courage, because in this case, he definitely wouldn't be able to retreat. There were already 3 masked men, one of them cracking his neck saying he didn't understand why they dared to flirt right in the face of death. Suddenly, right behind them, they felt danger, and also heard a not very significant crack. Right behind them, a man in a white robe with blonde hair appeared, as if he had jumped from the sky. Landing on the ground without any sounds, our hero realized that another martial arts master had shown up, because his movements were honed by hard work. The men in the quicksand immediately recognized the man, saying in one voice that it was Jian Yuanhong, the #1 swordmaster in the world, but it was too late. With the help of his blade, he delivered one powerful, sharpened, and very fast blow. No one, absolutely no one, understood when he managed to draw his sword and scabbard. As soon as he swung his blade, all 3 fell to the ground. He spoke loudly, but in the most cold-blooded manner. For the rest of those hiding to take the bodies of their comrades and get out of here, they immediately showed up. Starting to raise their bodies, they ran away with their tails between their legs while Yuanhong turned to our protagonist, asking if he was Xiang Tian. With the utmost seriousness and courage in his voice, our hero answered positively, thinking that he could not even discern his movements with his unique eyes. Hearing this answer, the swordmaster said with a smile, "You are very similar to him, and you also inherited his courage. Like our hero." As soon as he heard these words, he immediately began to ask about his father. But the man interrupted him without answering, and pointing to the pendant, he ordered it to be broken. Naturally, our hero did not understand this, and when he took hold of it, he tried to object, saying that it was a relic left to him by his mother. And the swordmaster asked not to worry, saying that this pendant was made by his father, also adding that the real relic was inside it. Looking anxiously towards his hand, our hero thought that even if that were the case, he did not understand how he could break the stone with his bare hands. He immediately tried to squeeze his hand, barely pressing it, when suddenly at that very second the stone shattered into small pieces, breaking like the weakest glass. Immediately starting to fall from his hands, seeing this picture, the boy's whole body shuddered, because he did not expect this. But as soon as he looked closer, he noticed a small scroll that remained right in his hand. Starting to examine it, he said anxiously, clenching his teeth. So that's what those people wanted. The scroll was inside the pendant all this time. He couldn't believe it. And the master began to talk about how his father wanted to protect him from all this. That's why he created the pendant, and said that it was a relic left to him by his mother. After thinking about it a little, Xiang Tian came to his senses, calmly this time asking what kind of person his father was. His interlocutor answered warily that he wanted the boy to live an ordinary life, peaceful and calm, so all he could tell him was that his father was a great man. Clutching that very scroll in his hand, our hero asked the man if he really thought he could live an ordinary calm life. After laughing a little, the man in white robes replied that that was why he was here. He wanted to take the boy as his student. Not immediately understanding, our hero asked again. But literally at that very second everything dawned on him. He immediately bowed his knee. Folding his hands, he showed respect to his great master. He immediately turned around and started to leave, saying that there was very little time left before the entrance exams, and also that his father wanted him to be able to pass the exams calmly, so he asked him not to fail. Well, they will take care of his training after finishing school. After the man turned away, as soon as he walked away, a girl ran up to him, who, helping him to get up, asked if everything was okay with him. But our hero was completely immersed in his thoughts. He thought that everything was going well, because now he could become stronger, and his eyes would greatly help with this. The next morning, our hero began to live like an ordinary person, or at least try to. After all, as soon as he showed up near the school, Chili immediately ran up to him and began asking him again if he would teach her martial arts. Hearing this voice, he could not believe that it was really her, because he himself wanted this, and she was asking him. She responded by screaming hysterically that he had promised to teach his wife martial arts, so she was ready for anything. But our hero, closing his eyes, told her that she was not his type. Chili responded by pouting and folding her arms, and began asking the guy what kind of girls he liked in that case. Without thinking for long, Xiang Tian raised his hand and replied, "At least those who don't dress up like clowns." Hearing this, the red-haired girl pouted even more. It seemed that she began to burn with anger. The girls who ran up after a while began to beg the girl not to be angry. After a while, Chili calmed down, loudly saying that it was just clothes, she was going to change them, and turning to the two girls, she added that they would help her with this. Our hero himself went to the meeting, going into a cafe that was not far from the school where he studied. As soon as he entered, his cousin immediately started waving at him, asking the boy to come to them as quickly as possible. Before she even had time to sit down, the gray-haired girl pounced on the guy, screaming that he had scared her to death yesterday. She asked if everything was okay with him. After all, Master Shu had taken all the subsequent questions into his own hands. She also wondered if they shouldn't at least call and thank him. The boy, smiling, asked the girl not to worry about it, because he had already taken care of it, thinking at that time that it was not he who thanked him, but the old man, because he had agreed to participate in the tournament for him. To help settle the matter with his nephew, seeing that he was quite famous, being in his debt would not be a great loss for him, our hero continued to reflect, starting to drink cola. Suddenly another blonde girl, embarrassed, snatched her hands, shouting that it was hers. The cousin interrupted this embarrassed cry by saying that she wanted to ask him to do something especially for her. They exchanged a few brotherly jokes about her having to begging him to help her. But then, she suddenly became serious, starting to talk about how she wanted the guy to play basketball for their art department team. Our hero was silent, not answering anything, when suddenly a group of people approached their table right behind him. The girl with pink hair asked our hero's cousin if she was really looking for an outside helper. The men next to her began to laugh loudly, because everyone understood what she meant, and the girl explained that she knew perfectly well that the people from their department were women, and they couldn't even recruit the required number of men. Our hero, whistling, looked closely at the standing girl in shorts, saying that she was a beauty with a height of 175, and also said that she had an ideal figure. He asked her if she would marry him. She responded with embarrassment and insulted the sitting boy, asking what kind of nonsense he was talking about. And then, pointing in his direction, she added that instead of making up for the missing number of people with pathetic guys like him, it would be better to immediately accept defeat. In response, the gray-haired girl stood up and said menacingly that this should not worry her, because if she wins, she will call her big sister at every meeting. She, smiling, replied that soon she would be calling her big sister. Our hero, drinking cola, thought about how grown-up ladies behave like kids, making bets, while the girl sitting opposite him was embarrassed to think that Xiang Tian was drinking her cola again. After thinking for a moment, our hero interrupted their arguments by asking, "What would you say if I also made a bet?" The pink-haired girl became interested in this and asked what he wanted to do with it. And our hero, still calmly, said, "If you lose, you will become my little wife, and you will call me Big Hubby at every meeting," winking. She immediately swung her leg at him in response, intending to hit him, shouting, "How dare he!" But he grabbed her leg, starting to get up, but at the same time holding the embarrassed girl. At that very moment, the cousin's hand hit the young boy right on the cheek, and she screamed and asked him what he was doing. Our hero's cousin's colleague accepted the bet, adding that if he lost, he would have to run through the school completely naked. Naturally, our hero accepted it, and after that the group of people began to move towards the exit. As soon as they left, the cousin immediately attacked her brother, starting to beat him. She could not believe that he was going to make her sworn enemy his wife. Some time passed, and it was time for the game, where, as it seemed, the gray-haired girl had a lot on her mind. Standing on the sports field, our hero's sister's colleague said that she would put only one strong player against them. Our hero himself, looking around, turned to the gray-haired girl, saying that even taking this into account, they did not have enough players. But the girl asked her to wait for him. Sometime later, 2 more guys appeared and greeted the girl. She immediately introduced the guys to each other, and our hero breathed a sigh of relief, because now they had a minimum number of players for the game. Gradually fans gathered, who clearly came to watch not basketball, but Fan Li, because each of the girls chanted his name. Hearing this name, the gray-haired girl immediately turned towards the site, because this name was familiar to her. She immediately noticed the guy, because he was a rather popular basketball player who began to show off in front of a crowd of girls. But a few seconds later, he was taken away by the pink-haired girl, who immediately began yelling at him, calling him a narcissist. Our hero, in turn, exhaled heavily, looking around, because no one came to support the art department team. But a few seconds later, the same girl whose cola our hero was drinking in translucent clothes appeared. She said that she would support their team. Seeing this, blood immediately started flowing from the boy's nose, because it wasn't she who came with translucent clothes, but his unique gaze was activated. The 2 people walking ahead, who had been brought in from outside by our hero's cousin, told them to pass all the packages on to them. Our hero at this time thought that he would not have to show his true strength, relying on these 2. A few seconds later the whistle sounded, which announced the beginning. Right there, that same basketball kid Fan Li scored the first goal, dunking into the hoop. The crowd started chanting his name even louder. They were happy that their favorite was the one who scored first. At this moment, our hero realized that it would not be as easy as he thought. The ball ended up in the hands of the purple-haired guy from the art department team sometime later. He was covered by Fan Li, our hero's comrade, who was squeezed because he didn't know who he could pass the ball to. Looking towards his teammate, he realized that Hu Peng could not be given the ball because he was being covered by several players. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the tough pressure from his opponents. At that moment, our main character appeared right behind Fan Li, who was showing with his whole appearance that he should pass the ball to him. For a second, the purple-haired man wondered whether he should pass the ball to the guy, or whether it would be better to hold it until Hu Peng opened up. However, his opponents took advantage of this and knocked the ball right out of his hands. The boy realized that it was his fault that they were going to score this goal, because he couldn't decide how to act next, whether to pass the ball or whether to move on to someone else himself. The one who took the ball was the basketball star, who immediately rushed towards the hoop of our heroes. Our hero thought about it, because he didn't understand why during all this time the guy hadn't passed the ball to anyone. The scroll whistled, which meant a break. The score was already 40-0. The 2 that the cousin brought were angry. They threw their towels, panting from fatigue. Their whole bodies were covered in sweat. They were angry, because they were 2 professionals. But with these 3, they couldn't score even 1 point. And 2 people working in the art department responded that they explained the whole situation before the game, and also added that they had not given them a single pass. The purple-haired man turned up his nose and said that he didn't care, because he wouldn't play anymore. They wouldn't be able to even the score. Our hero's cousin asked Qing Shui what they should do, because if those two left, they wouldn't have enough players to play. The one who screamed the loudest, in turn, looked at the girls with a nasty look, thinking that if they came to beg them, he would think about it. At this time, our hero himself approached the pair, telling them to get up and follow him. Approaching the so-called professionals, he said that if they could not change this situation, it was no problem. He would do everything himself. Naturally, upon hearing this, the purple-haired man began to shout that the guy had gone crazy, because this score was impossible to even out. It was too big. In the second half, our main character came out as captain, intending to take everything into his own hands.